Hi everyone, welcome to the video, and this week it's all about writing exam paper questions. Welcome back to the channel. For those of you who commented and watched my last video, thank you ever so much. It was really lovely to hear and see all your lovely comments. This week, I thought we'd talk about exam paper setting. So if you're new around here, my name is Caroline. I am a lecturer in physics here in the UK. And actually, last week I was working from home and our internet stopped working on a couple of days. And it's quite interesting when the internet stops because you realise just how much you might actually be using it, in my case. But anyway, when the internet was down, I had to cancel a lot of my online meetings, a lot of the activities that I'd planned to do. And I thought, okay, what can I use to use my time productively whilst I haven't got Wi-Fi? And every summer, I always say that I'm going to get ahead with writing my exam paper questions. And inevitably, I never do. So usually I'm writing the exam paper questions later as we go into semester. But I thought, you know what? I've got a bit of space. Let me start thinking about my exams. Depending on what kind of module you're teaching or co-teaching will, I guess, depend on the assessments that you need to prepare for your module. So I teach across various undergraduate modules and master levels modules. And there's a real mix. We do some coursework pieces of work, there's some multiple choice tests, there's some laboratory work, but inevitably at the end of most modules there will be an exam. And usually that exam carries quite a significant fraction of the module marks. And it's quite an interesting topic at the moment, exam writing, because we've got all these new AI tools. ChatGPT in particular is coming out, and I think it is going to change, or it will change, the assessment landscape. In the past, when students took assessments home, so when we had, essays to do at home or writing computer code at home, you had, the internet to help you. But now we've got these AI tools that can effectively start to write or indeed write your courseworks or your assessments for you. And that's a really interesting evolving technology, and one that as the universities, we're definitely now having lots of conversations about how we use and adapt and embrace this technology into both our teaching and our assessments. But at the end of my modules, there will still be an in-person exam. So that's where the students come into the exam hall, they literally have their calculator, pens and paper, and they take an examination within maybe 1.5 to 2 hours. And so it was that paper that I was thinking about, okay, what questions do I want to write for the upcoming semester? Writing exam paper questions is an interesting and I think challenging part of being an academic, because you've got to set questions that are fair, that test and represent the course material that students have learned and acquired, but you're also looking to explore that student's understanding and depth of knowledge, and how much they're able to really maybe engage or apply what they've learned during their course. And again, I think this is going to vary from module to module. So I'm on a STEM-based subject, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So, my questions might be quite numerical. They could be going to a particular answer that we've kind of, looking for using equations or theorems to get to a particular solution. Yes, you may have the more open-ended essay-based questions as well mixed in. Other subjects will have a different balance, and you may have more kind of essay-based or long-form answers rather than the kind of the short quantitative ones that you often see in the STEM subjects. And so you've got to, as the examiner and as the course paper setter, make sure that you are providing an opportunity, I guess, for students to showcase their knowledge, but at the same time allowing some class differentiation so that you can say, okay, well, these students have got the basic knowledge, but these students have actually really got the in-depth, more advanced knowledge. And when it comes to exam paper marking, quite often you want to make the pass mark, accessible. So in my case, typically you need 40% to pass the exam. So, I need to have 40% of the marks being something that if you've attended the lectures and you've gone through the material and you've done the homework questions, you should be able to get those 40 marks. Now, of course, at university here in the UK, anything over 70, so 70%, is then a first, and that's the top level of mark that we will award at an undergraduate degree level. So actually, you've only got really then the marks between 40 and 70 to if you like differentiate the class within their knowledge and their learning. And that's not a lot of marks. And indeed, 50 is a 2-2 in the UK, 60 is a 2-1, and 70 is a first. So really you've only got 30 marks there to differentiate the students between your exam paper, which is worth overall 100 marks. So one of the things that I do when I'm setting my exam questions is I will look through and I will rate the different parts of the questions to say, okay, is this a part that's accessible? Is this a part that requires you to understand the material and apply it? And is this a kind of a more challenging, in-depth question where you're now having to use conceptual ideas, possibly in a slightly different way? And you need to get that balance somehow so that you can then accurately assess the students on your course. And I remember as a student doing an exam once, and I was so frustrated because the exam was 3 questions and you had to answer 2 out of 3. And there were 3 main chunks in the course. And I guess struggled with the 3rd chunk in that particular lecture series. So, the first part of the module was okay, the middle chunk was okay, and probably the 3rd part was probably the bit that I was weakest in, really. And then when I sat the exam paper, out of these wonderful question choice, they all were based on that last part of the course. So all the revision, all the prep work that I'd done for parts 1 of the course and part 2 of the course weren't actually being examined in that assessment, it turned out. The examiner had chosen to select all their questions from the last part. And as a student, I remember being infuriated with this, that I spent all this time learning material that wasn't going to be examined and assessed. And so it is, I guess, important that we in some way make sure our assessments are balanced to reflect what we have taught across the course. Now, obviously, you might choose to examine different parts in different ways. So you may choose to examine part of the course by doing experiment or assessment, or part of the course by doing short form tests, and then only have certain questions in your longer assessment papers. Something else to bear in mind is what material have the students had to practice for your exam paper. So quite often at universities we release past exam papers for students to get to practice their question answers. And that's fine, but for the last few years, our exam papers have been a bit different. Because we were in the horrible pandemic, we then had to do lots of online examinations. People were doing things at home, so an open book format. And that inevitably is going to change the style of the assessment, the style of the exam questions. So if students are going to look back, and they want to look at the exam papers from 2020, 2021, 2022, those exam papers might have been written for an open book examination, which will now be different to those who are taking an in-person examination now in either 2023 or 2024. And of course, you need to get your exam paper ready in time for your university examination review process. And I've definitely, I think, made a video on this. I'll pop a link to it. But it's not a case that you just write your paper and give it to the students. It has to go through an internal moderation process. It has to go through an external moderation process. It has to go through checks at the university level. There's a lot of stuff that happens once you've written that examination paper. And then to add to the workload, you're not just writing typically 1 exam paper. Quite often you have to write 2, because you have an exam in the main exam period, but then I have to write an exam paper as well for the late summer assessment period. And that's for students who, for whatever reason, weren't able to take the exam in the first examination window, or who maybe had an exam attempt that didn't go well and are taking a resit of that examination paper. So actually you have double the work. I've got to write 2 examination papers. And in my case, I have short questions. So they have to answer 5 compulsory short questions and then 2 out of 3 longer questions. And again, that might change the format of the questioning and how I'm phrasing my questions. So there's a lot to think about. And I would say that exam writing takes me longer than I think I'm planning to take it. So I like to take myself off to a quiet space. I need to do it surrounded with all my course notes because I need to see what I've taught the students to ensure that I'm writing an examination paper that then reflects that material. And also I like to take a step back and go, okay, how long would it take me to answer that question? And as the academic teaching the material, you are going to be faster. So you can often do the exam papers maybe in half the time, but if it's taking you too long to do the exam questions yourself, then they're not going to be a fair test for your class. So yeah, there's lots and lots of factors. But I'd love to know, do you write exam papers? Do you find it challenging? Do you find it easy? Is your university process quite involved with how the papers get moderated? I think it was really lucky that my Wi-Fi got cut off this week or the last week a little bit, because it gave me a chance to actually think through a little bit in advance about what I wanted to include in this upcoming season. So that's what I've been up to last week. Thankfully, I now have internet again. I can get back into the university campus as well. So a more normal week this week ahead of me. But take care of yourselves. If you're new to our little academic space here on YouTube, do think about hitting subscribe. Thank you again for all of your lovely comments. It's a really lovely community here. So please do join me next Monday at 10 o'clock here in the UK for another academic video. And in the meantime, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next week. Bye.